Okay, we're here today with Jim Stone with Animated Literacy. And Jim, can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing with your workshop today, and then maybe a little bit of information on if folks have some questions or want some more information, where they can or how they can contact you?
Sure. Well, first I'll give you my email, so don't forget that.
All right.
It's jstoneal@yahoo.com, so just jstoneal@yahoo.com.
Thank you.
And we're working on beginning reading instruction, getting kids off and going in the early stages of reading. And the primary thing is taking a look at all the research that we have available to us now that we didn't have in the past. That a lot of reading research has been done, but in many cases it's used in isolation. So the National Reading Panel says you have to know sounds for phonemic awareness, and you have to know phonics for letters, and you have to be able to combine those to form words, and you have to be able to access your prior knowledge with listening comprehension and vocabulary in order to be successful. But they haven't really gone into how children learn to speak. And what we know is that when you're reading, you're accessing the same brain areas that you do in speech, and all reading problems can be traced back to language deficiencies. So we take a lot of look at language development in terms of resequencing skills to teach them the way children learn language. And when children are learning to speak, we know that they can start to process things like Dr. Seuss's book, Cat in the Hat, before they're born. If it's read enough times, they can differentiate between that and other rhyming books. After birth, they go through a specific sequence that's true for autistic kids as well as Down syndrome and gifted kids and normal kids and everyone else, where immediately after birth they start to gesture. So if you stick out your tongue to a baby, they'll stick their tongue out, and we know that now in the past few years they've discovered that it's mirror neurons that enable that process to happen. And when you're sticking out your tongue, you're stimulating language centers and emotional centers and everywhere else. Then that progresses from all around the world, oo, e, and r, the first language sounds babies produce at 2 to 4 months old, but most reading programs begin with consonants instead of vowels. Then they move on to producing consonants, but when they do so, they combine them to babble with their goo-goos and gagas and mamas and babas, where they're not isolating consonants the way generally reading programs do, but blending and manipulating those vowels and consonants. So they change mama to baba, they've changed the to the ba, and they changed goo-goo to gaga, they changed the oo to the ah. And every child does that before they speak their first words. Then they go on into speaking their first words. So we do a lot with manipulating sounds in a way that's very similar to the way babies babble. Then their first words are always words that can stand alone, that have high visualization. And we know good readers can read text with no pictures and create the pictures. So we want kids to connect that visual imagery. So the first words that we're teaching kids to read are words that they draw. So we begin with P and U, and they draw a picture of a pup, and then we add M or P, and they draw a picture of a pop, and then we add M, and they draw a picture of a mom, and so forth, so that there's strong visualization to each of the sounds that they're blending. So as the children are hearing complete pieces of literature and responding to books that are rich in vocabulary and sentence structure and meaning, they're learning to manipulate the parts of language in a sequence that looks like the way they learn to speak. And then, as with speech, they move on to phrases. So as we're labeling, we move from labeling the pup to labeling the parts of the pup to the two-word level, where now they can describe the parts with adjectives and bring in verbs to name how they can move, and then on into high-frequency words and so forth, so that language is going in very rich, as it does in homes where children are read to, and then coming out very sequentially the way children learn to speak.
Wow. Well, a couple of things that I noticed today so far is the first thing, in the education world we hear so much about everything being research-based, and obviously what you have just described has very deep roots in research. And then the second thing, when I walked through the workshop just a few minutes ago and this morning, I noticed that there is stuff, quote-unquote, all over that you're using to present and to bring more meaning to the content of what you're presenting. Can you explain a little bit more about?
Sure. Basically, a lot of the research when it was first came out, it was not applied correctly. And so we got people who were saying, well, you're a visual learner, or you're an auditory learner, or you're right-brained, or you're left-brained. And it was this either-or concept, when that was really a misinterpretation of the research. So what we know now is you use your entire brain, that if you simultaneously put information into multiple areas in the brain, then later, as like a domino effect, if you have learned something by seeing it, tasting it, touching it, smelling it, or through multiple intelligences that Howard Gardner talks about, and you did that all at once, then at a later stage, any one of those senses or intelligences gets stimulated, and all the others who learned with it come online. Just like when you touch one domino, all the others fall down. And then a real critical piece in that is that emotion is the driving force behind it. So learning has to be fun. It has to be interesting if kids are going to pay attention.
Exactly.
Plus, the emotion is what enables it to be remembered long term. Just like when you're buying a car and they put the pretty girl on the car, the guy remembers the car because the pretty girl was there when he first saw it. So you've got to make those emotional connections to things that may not always be emotionally stimulating.
Well, it certainly sounds like that obviously, again, animated literacy is deeply based in research, and who doesn't like to have fun while they're learning? Because it has so much more meaning.
Now we've got the research to say why you have to have fun or it's not effective.
Exactly. Well, Mr. Stone, thank you very much for being at Greenbush today. We appreciate this. And once again, if anyone needs more information on animated literacy, they can obviously give us a call here at Greenbush or contact Mr. Jim Stone at his email address, which is
jstoneal@yahoo.com, or you can just go on the website, animatedliteracy.com.
Great. Thank you again for being here, and thanks for participating in our podcast.